Hello, everyone, and welcome into Coach Craig's Sports. This is the MLB DFS Core Pick video, Core Pick live stream for today, June 27th. It's a Tuesday. It's a full 15-game main slate, which is, I believe, the biggest we've had so far this year. It's the biggest you're ever pretty much going to see. So every single team is playing on this main slate. It's going to make for a very interesting main slate. It's going to be a slate that you very much want to mix and match today, especially if you're playing multiple lineups, because there are so many different teams that are in play. There are so many teams that you can stack. There are so many viable pitchers out there today. So it's going to be a very interesting slate overall. If you are joining me for the very first time, first of all, welcome in. Typically, I go over a recap of yesterday's picks. Since I went over this slate a little bit more in depth yesterday, didn't actually have core picks. Won't be doing the recap part, but we'll go right over into the weather for today's games, anything that could potentially be a factor. Then we'll go over to FanDuel, talk about the core picks that I do have for today's 15-game main slate. If you like them, go ahead and use them. If you don't, definitely don't have to use them at the same time as well. And then last but not least, going over the YouTube community tab and talking about the bottom half of the cheat sheet, the top GPP teams that I do have to stack for today. There's only 4 that fit on the cheat sheet, probably about 10 in total that you could stack overall today. So I'm going to start off with the weather report for today. So we have that Cincinnati and Baltimore game. That was a game that did get rain delayed at one point last night. There is a good chance of rain once again today at 62%. So that is something that we'll watch. So maybe we avoid this game a little bit more, but Baltimore was able to finish that game last night. So I do want to give a little shout out in one of the group chats that I'm in. My buddy Rusty, Devin's his real name. He said that, the Orioles have only had 2 games rained out in the past 2 seasons. So they have a really good ground screw there. So as long as nothing major happens, it should be a game that is able to finish at some point in time. Then we have the Pittsburgh and San Diego game. In Pittsburgh, there is a decent chance of rain over there as well. So maybe another game that we're trying to avoid a little bit. Not the greatest matchup, although I do kind of like Yu Darvish as a pay down option today overall. And then as far as the other weather goes for today, we got a lot of domes. We got a lot of non-weather spots, a little bit of chance of rain in Boston for the Boston-Miami game. And then out in New York for the Mets game versus the Brewers, 42% chance of rain at this point in time. But everything else looks pretty clear or is in a dome, so not too many concerns there. A little bit of chance of rain in Kansas City at 14%. If anything does majorly change for these games throughout the day, we'll leave it as an update down in the comments below, so definitely be sure you're checking up on that as we do get closer to lock. So I'm going to stop sharing this screen. We're going to go over to FanDuel, talk about the core picks that I do have for today. If you're joining for the very first time, I do go over one pitcher, 4 hitters that I do like for today, taking in a little bit of a combination of, past history, recent history, and then combining that all together. That's just kind of the way that I do like to go about it. Once again, with core picks, you don't have to play all 5 of these guys together. Obviously, stacks are going to play a big part, especially if you're playing in GPP formats. But with that being said, we're going to start off with pitcher Zach Gallen, $10,000, a little bit of price down spot for him overall, averaging 38 fantasy points per game on the season. Been pitching really well as of late, going against Tampa Bay Rays today. He's got 9 wins, 2.84 ERA, like I said, averaging 38 fantasy points per game and $10,000. The guy that's typically closer to $11,000 on most slate, but there's a lot of good pitching at the high end today. So the guy that gets bumped down just a little bit, we can take advantage of that. A little bit tougher matchup against Tampa Bay. Doesn't really have too much history versus them at all. So he is a guy that does stand out to me today. I do think he can have success against this Tampa Bay's Rays team, which is a pretty good team overall. Then we're going to keep moving down. We got Pete Alonso at $4,100. He is going against Julio Teheran today for the Milwaukee Brewers. Teheran obviously didn't pitch in the majors since like 2021 until this season. Been doing all right so far this season, though. But in his career, Pete Alonso is 5 for 7 with 2 home runs versus Teheran. So some pretty good history there at that. Obviously, Pete Alonso did recently come back from injury. Since then, he's been a little bit hit or miss, but he does have 2 games with home runs. So there is still some pretty strong upside on the season. Only that 222 average, 24 home runs, 55 RBIs, averaging just over 12 fantasy points per game. But I do like the matchup. A little bit of hit or miss there, so could be a little bit more of a GPP high upside type of play. Then at second base, we're going with Brandon Drury. He is $3,100, averaging about 10 fantasy points per game on the season. He is 2 for 3 with 1 home run in his career versus Michael Kopech. He has a hit in 10 out of his last 11 games, and I believe 5 or 6 multi-hit games during that stretch as well. So 273 average, 13 home runs, 42 RBIs on the season. Pretty decent season for him. $3,100, not a bad price tag. You can blame him at first base or second base on today's slate overall. Not sure that the Angels are a team that we specifically want to stack, but Michael Kopech has been one of those kind of hit or miss pitchers. Sometimes he goes out, he strikes out a lot of guys and looks pretty well. Sometimes he gives up, some pretty good runs on his fastball. So that is one that we do want to mention once again. And then as we keep moving down, we're going Manny Machado at third base. Obviously, that is one of the games that has some rain potential today. But he is 4 for 10 with 2 home runs in his career versus Rich Hill. Decent sample size history there. Got that 253 average, 9 home runs, 33 RBIs, 9.4 fantasy points per game. It's up to $3,300, so his price tag's really gone up as of late. But he does have a hit in 8 out of his last 9 games. So a pretty solid floor there at this point in time. Obviously, the only real thing that we're truly worried with him today is going to be some of that weather concerns. But do like that history versus Rich Hill in general. And he's kind of starting to turn it around once again this year. And then last but not least, I was kind of down to 2 different Milwaukee Brewers here because we wanted a cheap play. I try not to take up too much salary when I'm doing these core picks if you guys choose to use all 5 of them. So I ended up on Owen Miller here. You can play him at second base. You can play him at third base. You can play him at outfield. In this situation, he ends up in the outfield because we already got a guy at second base. We already got a guy at third base. $2,600 going against David Peterson today. 1 for 2 versus him in his career. Small sample size, happened earlier this season. Peterson recently recalled from the minors for this start today. Owen Miller, 279 average, 4 home runs, 21 RBIs. Projected to hit leadoff for this Brewers team if he's up there. A guy that typically does hit left-handed pitching pretty well. Had a really strong start to the year. It's kind of tailed off a little bit since then, but if he has one of those big games once again, going to be a pretty interesting play. 279 average, 4 home runs, 21 RBIs, averaging just under 8 fantasy points per game at $2,600. Another guy you could look at in that Milwaukee Brewers lineup is Joey Wiemer, who has been hitting really well as of late. He has a home run versus David Peterson earlier this year and 1 for 2 in his career versus him as well. So that's kind of where I'm at in terms of the core picks. If you go with these 5 players, definitely don't have to do it today. I definitely understand that you want to stack some guys on a 15-game main slate, but you would have $11,900 remaining, just under $3,000 per player. So, the ability to pay up for a couple of guys, if that's something you want to do, pay down for a couple different spots, or if you want to just make a little bit more balanced approach, that's definitely fine on today's slate as well. Obviously, like I said, stack's going to make a big difference on tonight's slate overall. And speaking of stacks, I'm going to stop sharing the screen, go over to the YouTube community tab, and talk about my top GPP teams to stack for today overall. So let me get this pulled up here real quick. Looks like we're lagging just a tiny bit today, which isn't too bad. So the top GPP teams that I do have to stack today, Texas Rangers, been a pretty popular one against the Detroit Tigers, but going against Matt Manning, he is making his return from the IL. Not the greatest in the majors so far in his career. Not a lot of history there versus Texas Rangers. So one that we can take advantage of. Definitely feel free to mix and match some different bats from there. Then we got the Dodgers in Coors Field. Going to be a very popular stack going against Connor Siebel. Very limited history versus him. He only pitched a little bit versus them at the beginning of the year where he came in relief of Ryan Feltner. And then we have the Philadelphia Phillies. A lot of these guys have hit Jameson Taillon pretty well, whether it's Bryce Harper, Bryson Stott, Kyle Schwarber. Nick Castellanos had a pretty good game versus him earlier this season. JT Realmuto is like the one that really hasn't hit him that great, but a couple different options there. Cody Clemens did hit a home run versus him earlier this year if he does end up in that starting lineup. So a few different options there to stack from Philadelphia. And then last but not least, we have the Cleveland Guardians going against Brady Singer. A lot of these guys have really good history versus him, whether it is Andres Gimenez. Jose Ramirez is a really strong one. Guy that arguably could have been in my core picks today. So if you want to play him instead of like Pete Alonso or a Manny Machado, you could definitely do that. 2 home runs, 7 for 16 versus Singer in his career. And then Stephen Kwan and Miles Straw both have decent history versus Brady Singer as well. So some pretty decent stacks out there. Like I said, 15-game main slate. There's probably going to be 10 different teams that you can stack on today's slate. If you want some more in-depth information, hitter versus pitcher matchups, all the pitchers on today's slate, whether I would consider them in play, risky play, or avoid, and then some additional stacks. Feel free to check out my Patreon. Feel free to check out my Patreon page at patreon.com/Coach Craig Sports. Small monthly donation over there. But with that being said, that's pretty much what I do have in terms of the core picks, top stacks for today. If you guys do have any additional MLB DFS questions, feel free to drop them down in the comments and I'll get back to you as quickly as possible. Like I mentioned earlier, we'll have all the weather updates there throughout the day. We'll have as many starting lineups as I can get to throughout the day down there as well. So definitely make sure you're checking up as we do get closer to lock, so you have the most up-to-date information as possible. And then if anything does change with my core picks, like somebody's not starting and I have an update to it, I will leave that as a pinned comment as well. Also, be sure to look out for the MLB prop of the day. We'll be trying to get that out in a video format later today. Very small, short video where I just go over my favorite prop for the day. And if you're interested in using that prop, be sure to check out Prize Picks, Parlay Play, and BetUS. My promo codes are down in the comments below. Helps you out a little bit as you get over there. Get some freebie stuff if you're into betting and everything else like that. Helps me out a little bit at the same time. But with that being said, if you are checking my channel out for the very first time, or you have yet to subscribe already, would definitely can't talk right now. Would definitely appreciate it if you do consider subscribing. Definitely helps build the community that we're trying to build here at Coach Craig Sports, which is one that's truly for you, the viewers, helping you with your DFS. Right now, it's MLB DFS. We got the championship game for USFL DFS, so that video will be coming out on Friday. And then on Thursday, I will be doing some CFL, some Canadian football DFS. So definitely be sure to check that out if that's something you're into. Those are both over on the DraftKings side. So a little bit different there, but primarily focused on the FanDuel side for MLB. But as always, if you guys have any questions related to either DraftKings, FanDuel, or any other site that you do play on, definitely feel free to drop it and I can look into it as well. But with that being said, that's all I have for today's video. Hopefully you all enjoyed. Hopefully you found this information pretty useful. Hopefully you learned a little bit of something as you do build out your lineups today. But that is what I do have at this point in time. Hopefully each and every one of you have a great rest of your day and some pretty good luck in MLB DFS tonight.